This is just Putin doing his best to salvage the situation and try to loyalty test military positions across his regime. So, I want to talk to you guys about the Purge. So we already released one segment, I think a week or two ago, about a purge that is going on in Russia, where Vladimir Putin, after the mutiny from Prigozhin, is trying to do a loyalty test throughout all of the military and throughout his administration, trying to stress test it to see who could he get rid of to make the regime more loyal, what military commanders, what politicians, etc. And recent reports indicate that this is heightened, with 13 military commanders possibly being detained currently and either being questioned or just being held, including General Surkovin, also known as General Armageddon, the person who has been awarded the Hero of Russia on 2 occasions by Vladimir Putin, the person who organized the Russian bombing campaign in Syria and the withdrawal of the Russian army from Kherson. And he is currently detained. He has not shown his face in public since he recorded what looked kind of like a hostage video, if I'm being completely honest with you, where he told Wagner to stand down. This all comes after there was revelations that he was likely actually part of the Wagner group as a VIP, if you're trusting the Western press. Anyway, the coup failed, the mutiny failed, and now Putin is stress testing the regime. 13 detained, 15 fired, but the problems that led to this happening in the first place, his regime still isn't still hasn't fixed. Hasn't fixed the ammo shortage, has not fixed problems with command and bad leadership, hasn't fixed a lack of medical equipment, a lack of high-tech missiles, a lack of winter wear, a lack of so many basic equipment, so many pieces of basic equipment for everyday Russian soldiers. And until they fix these problems with logistics, until they fix these problems with how much munitions these soldiers are getting, and to what commanders are being put in positions of power that could actually lead soldiers to victory and not just be fat pieces of shit who sit on their ass and don't know what they're doing and are sitting there for a paycheck. Until these issues are resolved, until the issues of the Russian command in Ukraine are resolved, what led to the Wagner coup is not going to go away. What led to the Wagner mutiny is all the conditions are still there. Nothing has changed fundamentally enough for me to think, okay, it is very unlikely that something like this happens again. There hasn't been enough change. And so until there is significant reform in how the military is run in Ukraine, how the Russian military is run generally right now, because it's just so corrupt, so incompetent, has so many issues with shortages, using less and less more up-to-date equipment, more and more older Soviet equipment from the 50s and 60s. Until these issues are fixed, they're going to keep running into issues like this in the future. There's no amount of stress testing they can do that's going to fix these problems and cause it so and make it so nobody is dissenting due to the poor conditions that the military is in right now, due to the poor condition that the soldiers are facing in the Russian military. Let's watch the CNN segment on this.
We're getting new video tonight of a deadly fight that broke out at a military camp near Moscow. According to Russian media, these men were about to be sent to the front lines. And then one of the soldiers here is said to have upset his superiors. He was reportedly then beaten by members of a reconnaissance unit and by military police. And then afterwards, a mass brawl reportedly breaks out with knives and a man dies. Well, a man dies there before he even gets to the front lines in Ukraine. But this...
How did a knife fight start? How does that even... Why? Okay, okay, first off, if you're a recruit in the Russian military, I don't know, or I mean anyone in the Russian military who give you the bright idea to take out a knife and start stabbing people, start a giant mobbed up knife fight, right? But why would they, why would that be the response? Could they, if they have military police there, why didn't the military police get the situation under control and stop a mass stabbing event? Okay, whatever. Russian military command, brilliant as always.
Chaos, this sort of brawling. I mean, this is exactly what senior Russian General Ivan Popov was talking about when he spoke out after he was fired for criticizing Putin's war preparation.
Okay, so Ivan Popov, I believe he's the commander of the 55th in Zaporozhye, which has been engaged in a lot of heavy fighting down there. He's been now critical of how the war is being run, and his criticisms about how the war is being run in the fallout of the Shoigu, Gerasimov almost sledgehammering, is going to get a much sterner response from the Russian government than it would have before, leading to him being fired. They don't want to encourage any more future Prigozhins.
As many commanders of divisional regiments said today, the servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine could not break through our army from the front. Our senior commander hit us from the rear, treacherously and vilely decapitating the army at the most difficult and tense moment.
Now, we don't know anything about what's happened to Popov since he sent that. I mean, it said that. He's obviously been fired, but, you know, where his whereabouts, his physical state, we don't know. We do know the Kremlin is dismissing those comments from a top general. Popov, though, of course, is far from the first general to cross Putin and to pay a price. Again, like I said, we know he's been fired. We don't know what else, if anything, beyond that. But we do know the Wall Street Journal is reporting tonight that General Sergey Surkovin, who has not been seen since Yevgeny Prigozhin's attempt.
Dude, and the thing that gets me about, and I said this at the time, the thing that gets me about this video that Surkovin recorded during the start of the Wagner coup, not only did it just look like a hostage video, and it was weird because he had like a gun on his leg. I guess it was supposed to be like, you know, project strength, but he just looked wasted. He looked and sounded like he was just covered in booze, that he was spending his weekend like kind of balling out. And then all of a sudden, these Russian government officials kicked in the door and said, "You're going to be recording a video for Mr. Prigozhin right now, sir. The gig is up, Mr. Secret Wagner VIP man." It looked suspicious at the time, and I remember commenting on it. And I didn't want to seem conspiratorial because I didn't want to like dip my toes into like pointless speculation of like, wait a second, he kind of sounds drunk right now. Is he okay? This is a weird video. Did he record this of his own fruition? But it doesn't seem like it was the case. It looks like it really was a hostage situation. I shouldn't have been as reserved as I was. I was right to smell something fishy. Well, not fishy. Well, I guess alcohol-y? I don't know. It's to smell something drunk. Smell something alcoholic.
Attempted rebellion is now being held and interrogated. Surkovin, of course, was an ally of Prigozhin's, who led that attempted coup. And Surkovin is not alone. According to this report in the Wall Street Journal, at least right now, at least 13 senior officers have been detained for questioning after the Wagner Group's uprising. That's pretty stunning, at least 13. And
13 is a lot, man.
And about 15 have been suspended from duty or fired. And then there's Prigozhin himself.
So you've got the twice awarded hero of Russia, General Armageddon, detained for questioning. We're not hearing anything about him. We haven't seen him in public. Prigozhin himself is in exile in Belarus, in hiding in a tent, apparently. From the video, the only picture we've seen of him as recent is him in some tent somewhere. Where exactly, we don't know. 13 military commanders detained. 15 military commanders fired. Yeah, I mean, this isn't exactly the Stalin purge in size and scale, but Putin knew that he looked weak after he let Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin off the hook, and so now he has to project strength somewhere. If he looked weak not only with Prigozhin, but then looked weak with dealing with every single other person afterwards, then this could encourage people to challenge his regime. Now, him making a deal with Prigozhin, period, and not just crushing and killing him, makes his regime look weak, gives people ideas. People are now thinking about a post-Putin Russia, the most they have in decades. Well, actually, maybe a decade and a half. And people are making contingency plans, which is the big thing. It's the thing you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't change what people think about your regime. You can't change that people saw your regime crack and now they know that, you know, it's fallible. It's malleable. It's something that can actually collapse in on itself because people saw it nearly collapse in on itself and that your regime had no flank to protect itself, right? So it's not exactly the Stalin purges in size and scale, but this is the best attempt Putin can make at trying to regain his authority while also not cracking down on Prigozhin too hard, I guess. I guess he wants to stick to that deal. Maybe he doesn't have the leverage to go after Prigozhin and arrest him. We do know that the FSB said that they still are continuing their investigation into Prigozhin, even if he's no longer wanted. So they're still trying to hold leverage over the guy and kind of hold him by the balls. But letting Prigozhin off the hook ever, period, was going to make his regime look weak. Making the deal with Prigozhin made his regime look weak. The whole situation happening in the first place made his regime look weak. This is just Putin doing his best to salvage the situation and try to loyalty test military positions across his regime. If he can loyalty test them, then hopefully next time nobody will do this because they'll be loyal to him and too afraid to turn against him. But the core issue will always be the state of the Russian military. And he can try to cover up the issue. He can try to just have his cronies in positions of power. But until he reforms the military, deals with the corruption issue, deals with the issue of poor military command, deals with the logistical problems, deals with the equipment shortages, deals with the amount of out-of-date equipment that the Russian military is using, the lack of computer chips, the lack of munition. Like there's so many issues. Until they deal with these issues, stuff like this is going to keep popping up in the future. Period. It just will. Because eventually there's going to be people who send enough of their boys to die who is going to turn around and say, can I please stop slaughtering my entire community in this counteroffensive that isn't working? You know, right now, the Russians are still attacking. I think some people, you know, they hear about the Zaporozhye counteroffensive and they hear about the movement around Bakhmut and they just assume that the Russians have dug in everywhere. And the Russians should just be digging in everywhere, but they're not just digging in everywhere. In Luhansk, they've actually continued the attack. They've continued up the offensive. Until the Russian command realizes the shit they're in and really puts all hands on decks to relieve the situation, try to salvage the situation. Like, all of this is just window dressing. Not to mention, the more that they cover up, fire, and, detain people instead of addressing the problems that those people were bringing up, you're just covering up the issue. And the more you cover up the issue, you can't resolve it. Her hair looks like a wig. Smells drunk. Got you. Does her hair look like a wig? I mean, maybe. I don't know, a little bit.
He still has not been seen since the insurrection. But for the first time, we're hearing from Putin about his alleged meeting with Prigozhin and 35 of Wagner's commanders, the meeting that Putin's spokesperson said happened a few days after the insurrection, a meeting that was said to have happened in Moscow. Speaking to reporters, Putin claims that he told the commanders at the meeting that they could continue to fight, but under a different leader. He then claims that the men were nodding in agreement. All these Wagner troops, they were totally in agreement. But he says Prigozhin, who was sitting in the front row, he says he spoke up and said, quote, no, the guys do not agree with this decision. That's what we're seeing here in this exchange with a reporter. Now, keep in mind.
Okay, by the way, I don't know if we should, that's an interesting report. The idea that, the Wagner guys are, they feel like they're a little in over their head now with Prigozhin, and they actually agree with Putin, and they're on his side, and Yevgeny Prigozhin's actually holding them hostage. But this is a report from Putin himself, right? This is Putin himself saying that they're facing this issue, right? That these poor souls are, captured by Prigozhin, and they just so desperately want to join the Russian MOD. Number one, I think it's bullshit, largely because Wagner contracts make you more money and you have more independence. Why would you want to be in the Russian MOD over being in Wagner in the first place? Especially if you've been in Wagner, you're used to that type of pay, you're used to that type of independence, and now you're going to go to a Russian MOD contract where you're going to get paid less money. I don't know, man. It's kind of hard for me to understand. But if the proposal is replacing Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin and keeping Wagner so they can keep these contracts, then it's more easy to believe, but still, it's from Putin. Take it with a giant grain of salt.
do not have any photo evidence or corroboration that the Putin-Prigozhin meeting took place or who was there. This is what the Kremlin is telling us. But keep in mind, Vladimir Putin is saying that the generals agreed to, that nodded in fighting for him, but highlights Prigozhin saying, no, the guys do not agree with this decision. Well, that's the context around which we have not seen Prigozhin since. President Biden says the U.S. has no idea what Putin has done with Prigozhin. He spoke today.
Determining what happens to Prigozhin, God only knows what he's likely to do. Well, I'm not even sure, we're not even sure where he is and what relationship he has. If I were he, I'd be careful what I ate. I'd be keeping my eye on my menu.
Matthew Chance is out front live in.
It's funny. That's a funny Biden quote. If I was him, I'd be worried what I ate. Okay, that's enough of that. But the purge continues. The purge continues.